6 weeks, 32 engineers, for consulting firms, and a $100 million defense contract, one software glitch away from vanishing. Inside the glass tower of Cygnus Systems, the tension was thick enough to cut. Code lines glowed red across giant screens like open wounds, and the faint hum of failing servers filled the silence between curses and sighs. What was meant to be the company's defining achievement, a neural weapons control system for the US military, had turned into a slow-motion disaster. At the head of the conference table stood Mary Smith, the CEO everyone in Silicon Valley whispered about, but few truly knew. Impeccably dressed in scarlet, with a calm that made grown engineers sweat, she scanned the room of sleepless faces and trembling hands. 6 weeks, she said quietly. And not one of you can tell me why my system is learning how to fail. No one dared answer. The coffee was cold. The charts bled error. Mary exhaled, sharp and measured. 30 minutes. Fix it, or I shut this project down and everyone in this room walks out unemployed. She turned and walked toward the door, heels echoing like gunfire in the silence. And that's when the elevator chimed. A man in a charcoal suit stepped out, no badge, no escort. He wasn't supposed to be there. Mid-40s, slicked hair, eyes that read the room like a threat assessment. He carried a black fedora in one hand and stopped at the board covered in tangled math. He studied it once, twice, then spoke in a low, distinct Italian accent. You're not debugging code, he said. You're teaching your machine to lie to itself. Every head turned. Before anyone could stop him, he picked up a marker, erased 3 variables, and drew a single curved line through the chaos. The equations balanced. The system, dead for days, suddenly stabilized on screen. The room froze. Mary, who had stopped mid-step, turned slowly. Her expression unreadable. Who are you? He capped the marker and met her gaze. Liberato Rossi, he said. You called the wrong kind of engineer. And in the next few minutes, this man, a former Mafia tactician turned silent investor, would do what an entire department of experts could not. He would fix a $100 million problem in seconds. What Mary did next would stun everyone in that room and begin a chain reaction that no algorithm could predict. Before we continue, like this video and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more exciting stories that you won't want to miss. The room hadn't yet decided whether to breathe. Liberato Rossi stood calmly beside the whiteboard, the marker still warm in his hand, while Mary Smith faced the ripple of stunned engineers like a conductor holding the final note of a symphony. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered, "What just happened?" But Mary didn't answer. She simply turned back to the man who had just undone weeks of chaos in under 60 seconds. Stay, she said to him, for the review session. Liberato raised an eyebrow but gave a subtle nod. Then he turned and walked toward the corner of the room, quietly folding his arms as if he belonged there all along. A few heads turned as he passed, others pretended not to watch. Mary addressed her team again, as if nothing had happened. Run the model. Now. Fingers flew across keyboards. Code flickered and flowed. What had once been a sluggish loop of failed logic was now humming like a tuned engine. The system's error rate dropped sharply. Latency dipped beneath the project's target threshold for the first time in nearly 2 months. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. It's clean. Mary offered no response. She didn't need to. Her eyes spoke enough. As the test cycle completed flawlessly, she tapped her tablet and said, "Schedule a full-scale benchmark by tomorrow morning. End of day, we present the revised model to strategic." No one questioned her. But questions burned behind every pair of eyes in that room. The man in the suit, the line he'd drawn, none of it made sense. Not professionally. Not procedurally. As people began filing out in quiet disbelief, hushed voices traded theories like currency. By the elevators, a junior software engineer named Trevor Yao hung back, face pale, thumb twitching nervously against his tablet screen. Something about that man's name, Liberato Rossi, tickled a memory buried deep. After the others left, Trevor opened an old, encrypted browser he kept for personal digging. A quick search. One result froze him cold. Interpol. 2016 archive. Naples collapse. Alleged financial architect Liberato Rossi disappears after syndicate sweep. Trevor's stomach dropped. He scanned through the article. No photos, just a grainy silhouette and a name spoken in whispers across Europe's underworld. Strategist. Systems fixer. The man who made money flow like water through stone. It couldn't be the same guy, could it? Back in her office, Mary Smith stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the sun begin to retreat behind the skyline. She hadn't asked who he was yet. Not really. She didn't need to, not when everything about him screamed of someone who lived outside the rules of access and clearance. Still, curiosity had a pulse, and it was quickening. She heard the door open softly. "You walk into my boardroom," she said without turning. "No clearance. No credentials. Solve a problem my entire team couldn't, and then say nothing. That's bold. Even for someone like you." Liberato moved closer, not hurriedly. "And yet you let me." Mary turned then, arms crossed. "That was instinct." He nodded. "Good instinct." A pause, then, "You wanted to ask. Go ahead." She moved around the desk and sat on the edge. "Who are you really?" He took a slow breath. "I fix broken empires." He gestured vaguely toward the windows. "Yours just happens to use electricity." "And the last one?" she asked. "Naples?" He smiled slightly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Old city. Older enemies." There was a brief silence, not uncomfortable, but dense with understanding. Mary studied him like a chess problem. Everything about him suggested discipline, danger, control. But beneath that control, there was a kind of fatigue, the kind that came from living too many lives in too many shadows. "You disappeared after a cartel raid," she said. "Interpol had nothing. But the syndicate lost all its top financial logistics overnight. They called it the cleanest collapse in organized crime history." Liberato didn't blink. "That's generous." "I call it penance." "You were their architect," she said flatly. "Not just a player. The brain." He nodded. "And the mistake." Mary leaned back slightly, studying him with renewed sharpness. "So why walk into my building?" "You built something worth saving," he said simply. "And something worth studying. Your machine isn't broken. It's following the wrong patterns because it's being fed by people protecting their own seats." "That's a big accusation." "It's not an accusation," he replied. "It's a pattern I've seen before." Mary stood, the tension between them now taut as thread. "I could have you escorted out." "You could," he agreed. "But then tomorrow, your system will fail again. And your contract will walk." She gave a slow, grim smile. "You're arrogant." He matched it. "I'm right." For a long beat, neither of them moved. Then Mary stepped toward him, her voice quiet but clear. "Be here tomorrow. Conference room C, 9 a.m. I want to see what else you can do. But understand this." "I'm not trying to take over," he interrupted. "I don't want your chair." "Good," she said. "Because mine doesn't come with a parachute." As he turned to leave, she added, "One more thing." He paused at the door. "I don't know what ghosts you're running from, Mr. Rossi. But ghosts don't need clearance." He smiled faintly. "Exactly." After he left, Mary stayed in the silence for a while, staring out at the fading sun bleeding gold over the rooftops. She wasn't sure yet if she'd just made a brilliant gamble or invited a very precise fire into her house. But the truth was undeniable. He had walked in and done what no one else could. And the future of Cygnus Systems might very well depend on what he chose to do next. Downstairs, in a quiet corner of the parking garage, Trevor Yao pulled out his phone. The Interpol file was still on screen. He tapped out a draft email to his supervisor. Subject line, about Liberato Rossi. His finger hovered over the send button. But then he thought of the system model that finally ran green for the first time in 6 weeks. He thought of the look on Mary Smith's face, not shocked, but calculating. Trevor closed the app, deleted the draft. Sometimes ghosts weren't just dangerous. Sometimes, they were the only ones who knew how to win a war. The boardroom on the 31st floor was colder than usual, and not because of the air conditioning. 12 seats, each occupied by someone who believed they were the spine of Cygnus Systems, surrounded the oval glass table like a jury prepared to convict. The windows framed the skyline in sharp silhouettes, but the real view was internal, focused on the woman walking in like she still owned the room. Mary Smith, unflinching in a graphite gray suit, scanned the faces of men and women who had once applauded her instinct. Today, they looked like they were rehearsing her eulogy. She didn't wait to be addressed. "I assume this isn't about the weather," she said, setting her folder down. The CFO, Harold Lind, cleared his throat. "It's about protocol, Mary. And boundaries. You let an unknown individual into a secure operations room during an active project failure. A man with no clearance," added board member Denise Rawl. "No badge. No vetting. No business in the building, let alone rewriting live code." Her glasses sat low on her nose, and her tone was sharpened to match. "This isn't a startup anymore. It's a defense contractor interfacing with the federal government." Mary listened in silence, hands calmly folded, eyes unreadable. She let them build their case, brick by brick, without interruption. On her tablet, the performance data from Liberato's fixed glowed in green bars, error rates that had finally collapsed into precision. "And yet," she said finally, "the system works." The words landed like a scalpel. Denise didn't blink. "We're not here to debate metrics. We're here to debate leadership judgment. You took a risk that could have compromised years of classified work. For that, we're calling a vote. Effective immediately, a motion to temporarily suspend your executive authority until full review." Mary raised one eyebrow. "You're voting to remove me because I made the system work?" Harold leaned forward. "Because you did it irresponsibly." She tapped a key on her tablet and turned the screen around to face the table. "You're all so focused on optics, you forgot the objective." The door opened. Every head turned. And in walked Liberato Rossi. Same charcoal suit. Same calm, sharp eyes. No expression, no apology. Just the unsettling energy of someone who could read every weakness in the room within 5 seconds of entering it. "This is not appropriate," Harold hissed. "Who allowed?" "I did," Mary said. "He stays." Liberato stood behind her chair, hands loosely clasped. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone sent a ripple down the spine of every executive seated there. "We're not turning this boardroom into a reality show," Denise snapped. "You can't bring a man with that background into this company without oversight." Mary tilted her head. "Would you like to ask him to leave, Denise?" "Feel free." A long pause followed. No one moved. Liberato finally spoke. "I understand your concern. But you're mistaking discomfort for danger. The system failed under your experts. It succeeded under mine. Not because I'm special, because I saw what they didn't." He stepped forward slowly, and the room leaned back almost as one. "The error wasn't technical," he said, voice calm as glass. "It was structural. You built an algorithm that couldn't distinguish intention from instruction. That's not artificial intelligence. That's artificial compliance. And compliance collapses under contradiction." Someone coughed. Harold shifted in his seat. "And your credentials to speak on this?" Liberato's eyes narrowed just enough to chill the air. "Power doesn't care who built it. Only who can wield it." The silence that followed was heavier than anything said. Mary stood. "The motion to suspend me requires a 2/3 vote." She looked around the table. "So vote. But understand what you're voting against." One hand rose, Harold's. Another, Denise. Then nothing. 8 hands remained down. Motion failed. Mary didn't smile. She simply closed her folder and said, "Meeting adjourned." As people filed out, some more pale than others, Liberato remained still, his gaze fixed on the skyline. "They won't stop," he murmured to her quietly. "No," she replied. "But they'll move slower now." In the hallway outside, Denise whispered to Harold, "She just weaponized a ghost." "No," Harold said darkly. "She weaponized a mirror." Back in the room, Mary poured herself a half glass of water, hands steady, pulse sharper than ever. "Thanks for coming," she said. Liberato looked at her sideways. "I'm not here for thanks." She nodded. "Then come tomorrow for the next systems review." He gave a slight nod. "Send me the specs by midnight." And just like that, he was gone. Alone again, Mary stared out at the skyline where power lived in towers and politics. She knew the war wasn't over. It had just changed shape. And this time, the rules didn't matter. When someone breaks the rules but delivers results others couldn't, should they be embraced or feared? What would you have done if you were in Mary's position? If this chapter had you questioning power, loyalty, and who truly deserves a seat at the table, drop your thoughts in the comments. We're listening. The 21st floor conference room was colder than usual, not in temperature, but in tone. Engineers avoided eye contact as Liberato Rossi entered and took the empty seat at the far end of the table. No one greeted him. No one offered to bring him into the pre-meeting chatter. He was a presence tolerated, not welcomed, like a shadow that had learned to wear suits. Mary sat near the center, calm and unreadable, her attention divided between the technical briefs and the shifting human temperature in the room. She had expected resistance, and she got it. But what surprised her was the shape it took, an organized silence, a withholding of acknowledgement. The kind of passive aggression common among the hyper-credentialed. Liberato didn't push. He simply opened his notebook and waited. As the lead engineer presented an update on the red loop neural sequence, Liberato's pen moved. He didn't interrupt. He didn't sigh or scoff. He just started rewriting the structure on a blank page, correcting equations with the ease of someone who had already run the simulation in his head. 15 minutes passed before anyone noticed he had stopped taking notes. "Is there a problem, Mr. Rossi?" the lead engineer finally asked, tone clipped. "No," Liberato said, not looking up. "There was. I fixed it." The room went still. He rose, walked to the smartboard without permission, and began copying his handwritten structure to the screen. Lines, loops, predictive forks. He changed 3 core weights, adjusted a feedback delay, and rebalanced a mistrained subroutine that had been ignored for weeks. The model recalculated in real time. A long pause. Then green. Latency down. Efficiency up. Performance up 37.2%. The room was silent, stunned. Someone tapped their stylus against a tablet nervously. Mary said nothing. She simply watched as Liberato returned to his seat like he hadn't just shattered the tension with quiet math. After the meeting, the team dispersed like leaves in wind. Only one person lingered, Jonas Liu, a junior dev barely 2 years out of Caltech, with a nervous energy and a habit of spinning his pen between his fingers. He hovered near Liberato, unsure how to start. Finally, he said, "The way you adjusted the nested loop delay, that's not something we've seen before." Liberato glanced at him. "Because you're teaching machines to imitate perfection. I teach them to anticipate failure." Jonas blinked, then nodded. "That actually makes a lot of sense." They ended up walking down to the cafe on the 17th floor, where the coffee was strong and the lights were always too bright. Jonas asked questions, genuine, specific ones, and Liberato, to everyone's surprise, answered. Not with arrogance. With clarity. As if finally, someone had asked in the right language. "Do you think machines can be loyal?" Jonas asked over a cooling espresso. "Not loyal," Liberato replied. "But predictable. That's the difference between a soldier and a weapon. One chooses who to protect. The other just fires when triggered." Jonas stared at him, pen still spinning. "Is that how you see people too?" Liberato paused. "No. People are messier. They don't trigger. They detonate." The next day, Jonas brought in an old AI framework he'd been tinkering with after hours. Liberato looked it over, then adjusted the trust decay formula, changing how the AI handled unreliable input. It worked. It worked better than anything Jonas had touched before. Word spread. Whispers began to change. The ghost wasn't just a ghost. He was building something. Mary watched from a distance. Observed the shift like weather. Engineers still kept their distance, but the edges were softer now, comments were less barbed, questions occasionally directed his way. And Jonas, young, enthusiastic, reckless, had become a bridge between 2 islands. That night, after most had gone home, Mary found Liberato alone in the glass-walled server hall. The machines hummed around him like an artificial forest. He stood in the middle of it, perfectly still, as if listening to something beyond sound. She didn't interrupt. He spoke first. "My brother was supposed to be the genius," he said quietly. Mary stepped closer, unsure if this was meant for her. "You never mentioned you had a brother." "I don't," he said. "Not anymore." The hum of the machines continued, low and steady. "He was 10 years younger," Liberato continued. "Loved numbers. Built games inside of spreadsheets. I pulled him into my world too early. Promised I could keep him safe." Mary didn't speak. She waited. One wiretap. One wrong conversation. They found him in the Bay of Naples 3 days later. "After that, I stopped fixing things for other people. Until now." She studied him. The precision. The control. But underneath, she finally saw it, the fracture line. "You think this will make up for that?" she asked. "No," he replied. "But I think guilt is a terrible blueprint. And I'd rather build something else before I run out of time." In that moment, Mary stopped seeing him as a risk. She saw him as a man, one carrying a ledger not of crimes, but of debts he was still trying to repay. 2 days later, in another technical meeting, the team found themselves at a coding impasse, something subtle, but enough to stall simulation. The lead dev sighed. Then, without prompting, turned to Liberato and asked, "You want to take a look?" Liberato didn't smile. But he nodded. That was enough. The invitation wasn't sent over email. It wasn't part of a calendar event or tagged urgent, like everything else on Mary Smith's schedule. She simply passed Liberato in the corridor after the systems review and said, "North Beach. 7 p.m. Come hungry." Then she kept walking. He didn't respond, but he also didn't need to. By the time she arrived, he was already seated near the back window of a dim, quiet Italian restaurant nestled between 2 shuttered bookstores. The lighting was low and amber, casting soft shadows on the warm-toned walls, where oil paintings hung crooked but proud. The kind of place that never took reservations because it never had to. He wore the same charcoal suit, but without the usual armor in his posture. His hands were relaxed, his expression unreadable, but not unkind. Mary slipped into the seat across from him, her hair down, her usual structure softened by a cream-colored wrap sweater and worn jeans. No assistants. No bodyguards. Just 2 people who knew how to build and break systems, finally outside the machine. A candle flickered between them. He nodded at her glass. "Red or white?" She smiled faintly. "Red. But not sweet." "I don't trust sweet." He raised an eyebrow. "That explains a lot." They ordered something with garlic, something with basil, and a bottle older than either of them pretended to be. For a while, they didn't talk about Cygnus, or code, or contracts. They talked about Rome. She had only been once, on a 3-day investor tour. He described it like he missed it from the bones out. "You grew up there?" she asked. "No," he said. "But it's where I learned how to disappear in plain sight." She tilted her head. "You always talk in riddles, or just on Thursdays?" "Only when I trust someone not to fill in the blanks with something worse." She didn't reply right away. The wine had softened the sharpness behind her shoulders. She looked out the window for a beat, then back at him. "Do you ever miss being anonymous?" He looked at her, measured and still. "No one like me is ever anonymous. Just unconfirmed." The food arrived. Rich, fragrant, grounding. She leaned back as they ate, as if each bite peeled another layer away. "You know, there was a time I thought the only way to survive this world was to never need anyone," she said, almost offhand. "Then one day I woke up and realized I didn't remember the last time someone asked how I was without waiting for a report in return." Liberato set his fork down. "Let me guess. Your father taught you that." A pause. Then a single nod. "He built the first iteration of Cygnus," she said. Then disappeared into acquisition meetings and stock options. When he did look at me, it was through the lens of performance." She sipped her wine. "I outgrew my need for approval. But I never lost the blueprint." He listened without interruption. Not with pity, just presence. "I took the company public, made it mean something again," she said. "But every time I feel the gears slipping, I hear his voice, telling me I'm only as good as my last quarter." Her hand tightened around the stem of the glass. And I hate how right he still is. Liberato's voice was quiet, deliberate. You run a machine, but you are not one. She didn't answer, but the silence between them changed shape. It wasn't awkward or tense. It was honest. They sat in it like people who knew the cost of silence and its weight. He looked down at his plate for a moment. The Mafia never really lets you go, he said. Mary raised her eyes. Even after all this time? They don't care about time. Only leverage. He took a slow breath. I was never the muscle. I was the map. The one who knew how to move things without leaving fingerprints. Until I couldn't undo one of the moves I made. She didn't press, but her gaze didn't shift. My brother, he said. He was clean. I pulled him in close to protect him. But I pulled him too close. A long pause followed. The sounds of clinking plates and low conversation buzzed around them, but between them, it was still. I know what it's like to build a fortress out of guilt, she said quietly. You forget that walls are supposed to keep things out. Not in. He smiled faintly, not mocking, just sad. I don't believe in angels. She tilted her head, intrigued. Then what do you believe in? Architects, he said. The ones who design the things people only notice when they fall apart. She laughed, a soft, surprised sound. For someone who doesn't believe in angels, that's dangerously close to faith, she said. He raised his glass. It's closer to math. Every system collapses eventually. I just like making them last longer than expected. The bill arrived, but neither of them reached for it right away. Mary leaned back. You know, I didn't ask you here to confess anything. I know, he said. You asked because you wanted to see if I was just the suit and the scandal. Or something else. Did I get my answer? I think you already knew it. Outside, the city breathed around them, fog curling between street lamps and quiet foot traffic along the cobblestone stretch of North Beach. They walked side by side for a few blocks, the silence now warm, held rather than avoided. At the corner, where their paths would split, she looked up at him. So, what happens next? She asked. He looked ahead. Tomorrow? Back to chaos. She smiled. You say that like it's a bad thing. He met her gaze. It's only bad if you're not the one holding the blueprint. And then, for the first time between them, the distance wasn't strategy. It was choice. Have you ever built walls to protect yourself, only to realize they kept the wrong things in? What conversation would change the way you see someone if you dared to have it? If this chapter left you thinking about trust, control, or the cost of opening up, drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every one. It started with a hiccup. A line of code appeared in a competitor's beta model that looked eerily familiar, too familiar. The syntax, the variable structure, even the naming conventions mirrored proprietary language used in Cygnus Systems' neural interface. When Mary first saw the leaked spec sheet forwarded anonymously to her inbox, her hands stilled on the keyboard. No watermark, no obvious signature. But it screamed of betrayal from inside her own walls. She called an emergency lock session, no phones, no external access, all projects suspended under internal audit protocol. The room filled quickly with engineers and project leads, some defensive, some confused, all under quiet suspicion. Mary stood at the front, her expression unreadable. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Someone handed our tech to Argon Dynamics. And if they think I won't tear this place apart to find out who, they don't know me. Liberato watched from the side, leaning against the wall with arms crossed. He didn't speak, not yet. He simply scanned the faces in the room like someone reviewing a lineup before a war. He didn't need passwords or firewalls to find what he was looking for. He just needed patterns. And humans were nothing if not predictable. After the room emptied, he pulled Mary aside and asked for access logs, not digital, but behavioral. Who stayed late? Who logged in during odd hours? Who asked the wrong questions at the right time? She gave him everything. I want them gone before the press smells it, she said. No drama. Just extraction. Liberato spent 6 hours in a dim side room with only a legal pad, a data dump, and a mug of black coffee. He didn't look for proof. He looked for disruption. Meetings that didn't make sense. Timestamps that aligned too perfectly with other absences. Slack messages that fell off by a single word. At 1:47 a.m., he walked into Mary's office and said 3 words, "It's Marcus Quinn." Mary blinked. Project lead. He's been leaking edge loop compression code for weeks, Liberato said, under the guise of testing latency drops. Argonne's new predictive model mirrors ours down to the error tolerance. Mary leaned back, calculating. Do we confront him? No. We cut him, Liberato replied. Quietly. Like a clean line of code. By 10 a.m., Marcus was escorted out of the building without incident. No press release. No explanation. His system access evaporated within minutes. His name removed from internal rosters like it had never existed. The team buzzed with confusion, but no one dared ask. That was the thing about working at Cygnus under Mary Smith. The line between security and silence was thin, and most preferred not to cross it. But the message was clear: traitors don't get meetings. They get erased. Still, the ripple had already begun. The leak had reached the ears of the Department of Defense's review board. And within 24 hours, Cygnus received a formal request, a live demo. On-site. No margin for error. Either prove the system works in real time, or lose the deal. Mary stood by the window of her office, fingers pinched around the bridge of her nose. They want to see the entire neural targeting loop in action, start to finish. Under a simulation environment we don't control. Liberato stood behind her, quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Let them." She turned slowly. That's a bold suggestion for someone who's still technically unofficial. He met her gaze. Then make it official. She didn't respond right away. Her silence stretched just long enough to be mistaken for hesitation. Then she reached into her drawer and pulled out the company restructure draft she'd been sitting on for weeks. Acting Chief Technical Strategist, she said, placing the document on the table. Effective immediately. He signed it with a Montblanc pen that had belonged to her father. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. With a signature, the man who once destabilized crime networks across Europe now held technical authority inside one of America's most closely watched AI firms. The backlash was immediate. Internally, Slack threads exploded with disbelief. Anonymous forums lit up with accusations, fears, and conspiracy theories. Some employees threatened to walk. One threatened to leak to the press, which, of course, happened anyway. By the following morning, the headlines were unavoidable. Criminal minds power AI revolution? Mafia brains in military tech, genius or gambit? Cygnus installs shadow figure as chief tech-led board silent. Mary didn't flinch. She held a press silent stance. No interviews. No denials. Just numbers. And the numbers, for now, were perfect. The system was performing better than ever. Error rates were down, predictive stability was up, and latency had shrunk by nearly 40% since Liberato took over streamlining. Even the skeptics couldn't argue with green dashboards. But tension now walked the halls of Cygnus like a second shadow. Jonas Liu, the junior dev who had once bridged the team to Liberato, passed him in the hall and said, "They're scared of you now." "I'm not here to be liked," Liberato replied. "Yeah," Jonas said. "But they forget that sometimes the villain is the only one who read the blueprints." Liberato paused, then clapped him lightly on the shoulder. "Keep building, Jonas. Let the rest catch up or get out of the way." In the war room, 2 days before the demo, Mary briefed her senior staff. "This is the most important demo we've ever done. The outcome determines more than just our revenue. It decides whether Cygnus is the future or a failed experiment." She turned to Liberato. "You'll run point on all technical systems. Are you ready?" He didn't blink. "I was born in war rooms." The conference hall on the 18th floor of Cygnus Systems was dressed like a stage built for history. Rows of seats formed a crescent around a sleek demonstration platform. At the center, a curved LED wall pulsed with data streams, neural feedback loops, and a real-time command interface. Government observers in tailored suits took their places quietly, briefcases at their feet and expressions unreadable. This was not just a presentation, this was a verdict waiting to be delivered. Mary stood off to the side, spine straight, voice sharp in the final prep meeting. "Keep it clean. Keep it lean. No jargon. No improvisation. The CTO, Elliot Crane, nodded stiffly, already sweating through his shirt collar. Engineers sat in their assigned rows, headsets on, backup plans loaded. No one dared look at Liberato Rossi, who remained near the back wall, silent, hands behind his back like a soldier at parade rest. At 10 a.m. sharp, the doors sealed and the lights dimmed. A hush fell over the room. Mary stepped onto the platform, heels measured and voice steady. "Welcome to Cygnus Systems," she began. "Today, we present the next generation of adaptive neural command control. Built to evolve. Designed to protect." The screen lit up with simulations, unmanned aerial drones responding in real time, adapting to environmental shifts, rerouting commands through decentralized decision logic. The data was clean. The output perfect. A low murmur of impressed government voices echoed in the back row. And then it flickered. Just once, a blip on the latency indicator. Yellow. Barely visible. Then again. Longer. The 3D model on the wall shuddered mid-rotation. Frames skipped. Sound desynced. Elliot froze at the podium, his eyes wide, lips moving but no sound emerging. Behind him, two senior engineers began tapping furiously, pulling up diagnostics. The simulation stuttered again, then stalled. Dead center. Frozen. Whispers rose. A cough. A pen clicking too fast. One of the military observers leaned toward the other. "Is this part of the presentation?" he muttered. Mary's pulse didn't race, but she felt her throat tighten. She turned toward Elliot. "Well?" she asked through her teeth. He didn't answer. He was staring at the screen like it had betrayed him personally. At the back of the room, Liberato slowly stepped forward. No badge. No clearance. Just presence. Like a surgeon walking into a room full of people already holding the wrong tools. "Don't," someone whispered. But he kept walking. He knelt beside the server array embedded under the platform and pulled out a small flathead screwdriver from his jacket pocket. Then, improbably, a paperclip. With practiced efficiency, he bypassed the visual interface entirely and accessed the raw neural feedback relay from the source module. One connection had looped back incorrectly, a latency buffer overflow misrouting priority commands. He clicked the override. Reset the loop. Rerouted the predictive threshold. Then he stood up, wiped his hands with a handkerchief, and returned to the wall. The screen pulsed once. Then twice. Then it restarted, clean, perfect, seamless. The simulation picked up without skipping a beat, this time smoother than before. The drones flew. The output matched projected command paths to within 0.2% of ideal. The predictive models corrected in real time, adapting flawlessly to new variables injected live. Mary exhaled once, the only sign she had ever been holding her breath. No one applauded. No one moved. Until one of the officials, seated dead center in the front row, leaned forward. "Hire whoever that is," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Or we walk." Mary didn't miss a beat. "He already works for us." There was a long silence, then a few quiet chuckles. Nervous at first. Then real. The room relaxed. Shoulders dropped. Elliot blinked as if waking from a dream. Liberato said nothing. The demo concluded without further issue. The observers filed out one by one, nodding quietly, murmuring to aides and assistants. The room emptied slowly. Mary stood alone at center stage for a moment before stepping off. Her eyes scanned for one person. She found him near the far exit, already halfway through the door. "Rossi," she called. He paused. She walked up to him. "You just saved the most important contract this company has ever touched." He raised an eyebrow. "Then by better wiring." She shook her head, laughing softly despite herself. "You knew it was going to happen." "I suspected," he said. "The buffer routing was too perfect." "Which usually means it's one bad packet away from collapse." "And you let it ride?" "I let them see what I fix when no one's watching." She looked at him for a long moment. "You're not just a strategist. You're an operator." He tilted his head. "Same thing. Just one wears cleaner gloves." They stood in silence, the buzz of the room now gone. "Come upstairs," she said. There's more to discuss. He nodded once and followed her into the next fire. The demo hadn't even cooled before the media set fire. Within hours, headlines flooded every feed and inbox. Ex-Mafia mastermind saves defense contract, read one. The ghost in the neural machine. Cygnus secret weapon, read another. By sunrise, Liberato Rossi's name trended on 3 continents, each post more scandalous than the last. Investors called in waves. Some demanded clarification. Others demanded blood. The boardroom that had only days ago rejected a suspension now called an emergency session with twice the urgency. Mary received the summons at 6:11 a.m., mid-sip of bitter black coffee, eyes still heavy from 3 hours of sleep. She didn't flinch. She closed the message, stood up, and called Rossi. By 8 a.m., the glass boardroom was packed with sharp suits and sharper agendas. The view of San Francisco behind them felt ironic, a city built on disruption now staring down the face of it. Mary entered without theatrics, crisp in black, every button fastened like armor. Liberato followed, silent, drawing more attention than he acknowledged. The tension was heavier than it had been during the demo. This time, the war wasn't technological. It was reputational. Harold Lind, CFO, spoke first. The media is labeling us a liability. Denise Rahl followed. The Pentagon's legal team has already flagged possible contractual violations due to unsanctioned personnel access. Another voice chimed in. Cygnus stock dipped 7 points overnight. Investor confidence is compromised. They looked at Mary like she had committed corporate treason. She looked back like they were already outdated software. Then, for the first time in a Cygnus board meeting, Liberato Rossi spoke. You're all concerned with optics, he said calmly, voice like slow steel. You should be more concerned with outcomes. Harold bristled. You don't have standing to. I have standing because the contract didn't walk. I have standing because the system you were all prepared to bury is now operational at 97.3% efficiency. And I have standing, he added, because every executive in this room signed off on 5 consultants who failed to do what I did in 47 seconds. The room shifted. Not entirely, but enough. Mary said nothing. She let him speak. You don't fix a failing empire with familiar hands, Liberato continued. You break pattern to build future. And right now, your fear of my past is costing you the one thing that matters more than safety, relevance. The room stilled. His words didn't explode, they settled like law. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then a voice came from the end of the table. We've reviewed the data, said Maxwell Gentry, the largest investor in the room. A man whose silence had always been more valuable than his opinions. Your system is outperforming projections. The DoD has issued a conditional extension. As far as I'm concerned, the question isn't whether we can stomach the headlines. It's whether we're smart enough to leverage them. Mary's fingers curled against the folder on the table. She nodded once. Liberato stays, Maxwell added. And so does Mary. Denise pursed her lips, but said nothing. When the meeting adjourned, Mary didn't wait for conversation. She walked straight to the elevator, Rossi beside her, the buzz of muttered politics trailing behind them. They didn't speak until the doors closed. Then Liberato said, they'll survive the scandal. What they won't survive is success they didn't authorize. They'll try to reclaim it, Mary said. Rebrand it. Scrub your name from the final version. He shrugged. Then we keep writing new versions. They didn't go back to their offices. Instead, they took the private lift to the rooftop, the only place in the building where the air didn't feel like performance. The city sprawled below them, the bridge stretched like a ribbon of light over the water. Mary leaned against the railing, arms folded, face still. You saved us again, she said. Liberato shook his head. No. You let me. She turned to look at him. Same difference. No, he said. It isn't. The sky was starting to shift, golden spilling into steel. A metaphor in motion. Neither of them pointed it out. Some moments don't need narrative, only memory. Do you regret it? She asked. Coming here. He didn't hesitate. No. Even with the fallout? He looked over the edge, wind tugging at his coat. Fallout only happens when something hits hard enough to matter. I've spent years moving quietly through places that didn't. They stood in silence again, the kind of silence that holds weight. Then buckle up, she said, half smiling. Because we're not done building yet. He returned the smile. I wasn't planning to be. If you had to choose between protecting your reputation or delivering undeniable results, which would you choose and why? If this chapter made you rethink what power really looks like, drop your answer in the comments. Let's talk about it. The morning after the headlines died down, Mary found Liberato in the server room, not in his usual suit, but in a black turtleneck and sleeves rolled halfway, reviewing code like it was poetry. The glow of the machines painted him in blue and shadow, a figure caught between the present and something older. He looked up when she entered but didn't straighten. "You're early," he said. She smirked. "Or maybe you're always late to the normal parts of this job." She handed him a slim black folder, leather-bound, no logo, sealed with a silver clasp. He raised an eyebrow but didn't open it right away. "What's this?" he asked. "Your next decision," she replied. "Or your first, depending on how you want to see it." Inside, an official offer for permanent placement on the Cygnus Systems executive board. Title: Chief Systems Architect. Full access, full authority, and full visibility to every major government partner they were now aligned with. He didn't speak for a long time, just stared at the pages like they were written in another language. Mary didn't rush him. She knew this wasn't a technical question, it was existential. "You can say no," she added softly. "But I don't think you want to." He closed the folder but didn't hand it back. "Do you have any idea what kind of attention this draws?" he said. "Interpol doesn't forget. The Naples families don't forget. Hell, half the people who fund your contracts probably have dossiers with my name blacked out in every paragraph." His voice didn't rise, but it deepened, like he was speaking into the past. She nodded. "Then let them read." He stared at her, searching for the catch. "You're gambling everything on someone the world still labels as a criminal." "No," she said. "I'm gambling everything on someone who knows what it means to build something in the dark." He blinked once. That was enough. He moved to the window, staring out over the city. Glass and light. Wealth and war. For a moment, he wasn't in San Francisco anymore. He was in Naples. The memory came sharp and clear, a back alley behind a marble bank, rain hitting cobblestones like coins, and his brother laughing about something stupid. That laugh, the sound that still haunted him. That night, two men in black cars, a wrong message decrypted too late, a body fished out of the bay 3 days later. Liberato had built the algorithm that made the laundering invisible. But he couldn't unbuild what came next. He remembered the scent of blood and wet concrete. The way he scrubbed his name from every system, every account, every city that knew it. How he became a ghost in a world run by ghosts. Naples didn't forgive, and it never forgot. And part of him never left. Mary waited. Not impatient. Just present. Finally, he turned. "If I say yes, I don't hide. I don't soften my voice to fit the room. I won't pretend to be someone the board can polish up and parade." "I don't need polish," she said. "I need edge." He stepped closer, the folder still in hand. "If I stay, I don't stay quiet." She smiled. "Then we finally understand each other." He opened the folder again, signed it with her pen, silver ink, fast strokes, no hesitation this time. When he finished, he set it on the table between them like a pact. Their eyes met across it, and something unspoken locked into place. Trust. Not blind, but earned. They shook hands. This time, it wasn't about protocol or performance. It wasn't just business. It was the first honest agreement either of them had made in years. The ink dried faster than expected. A stylized signature from a government official, a notary seal, and 12 months of tension snapped into something weightier: finality. The Department of Defense contract was officially awarded to Cygnus Systems, valued at $1.8 billion over 5 years. Military-grade adaptive AI, trusted now not just for simulations, but for real-time tactical deployment. The technology they nearly buried now stood at the front lines of a new era. Mary stood on stage at the Global Autonomous Systems Summit, flanked by steel, glass, and reputation. Liberato Rossi stood beside her, not in the shadows, not at a distance, but on equal footing beneath the lights. Cameras flashed. Attendees whispered. Every headline wrote itself. From Mafia to machine learning, the unlikeliest architect of U.S. defense tech. The ghost who rewired an empire. Redemption or recklessness? Cygnus billion-dollar risk. None of it mattered. Behind the scenes, the stock surged. Triple valuation in 6 weeks. Investors who once muttered threats now fought for shares. And the board, once skeptical to the point of sabotage, smiled for photo ops and called it vision. It wasn't hypocrisy, it was survival. Liberato didn't speak much at the summit. He let Mary handle the headlines, the handshake deals, the analysts. But when one reporter asked him what had changed in his life since joining Cygnus, he answered with 5 words. Now I build above ground. Mary caught his eye across the crowd. A slight nod passed between them. More powerful than applause. More enduring than a contract. Later that night, the rooftop belonged only to them. The wind whispered between antennas and exhaust vents. Below, the Bay Bridge stretched like a lit artery across the city's heart. Mary leaned against the railing, a glass of something sharp in her hand. Liberato joined her, coat undone, the skyline glowing in both their eyes. We did it, she said. Her voice wasn't triumphant, it was tired, but content. He took a slow sip of his drink. You did it. No, she said. We did. She paused. They would have buried the whole company if you hadn't walked in with that fedora and lit a match under their assumptions. He looked out at the bridge. Funny thing about chaos. Most people think it's destructive. But it's just unclaimed energy. She smiled. And you claimed it. They stood in silence for a moment, the wind tugging gently at her coat and his collar. Lights blinked below, the hum of the city a steady pulse. In that stillness, neither of them felt powerful, but they both felt real. To trust, he said, raising his glass. She clinked hers softly against it. To chaos, properly harnessed. They drank not to endings, but to beginnings. Behind them, the skyline shimmered with quiet conviction. It didn't matter what they had been, CEO, ghost, criminal, architect. What mattered was what they had become, something sharp, enduring, and immune to the noise. A new kind of empire, born not from purity, but from precision. And they had built it. Together. Fade to black. Thank you for listening to this story until the very end. There's another interesting one on your left screen that I think you'll really enjoy.